Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what's probably the most agonizing, universal struggle in the entire creative world. I'm talking about that relentless tug of war between making money and staying true to your artistic soul. If you've ever felt like monetizing your work basically means selling out, or on the flip side, that protecting your art dooms you to a life of scraping by, well, you're definitely not alone. We're going to break down some really fascinating insights from our source material that completely reframe this dilemma. Plus, we'll go over some highly practical ways to navigate this tension without losing your mind or your passion. All right, let's jump right in.
Man, we've all been there, right? You spend hours, maybe even days or weeks, obsessing over every single detail of a piece. You're literally pouring fragments of your soul into it. And then you launch it and hear absolute crickets. Just complete silence. But then, that hurried, rough afterthought you toss together without overthinking, it sells out almost instantly. It's wild. The source material highlights this exact paradox, and it's a reality that absolutely grinds down the souls of countless creators. When the market rejects your polished masterpiece, but totally rewards your rushed prototype, it leaves you feeling entirely drained. You start questioning your talent, and honestly, you wonder if putting things out into the world is even worth the pain anymore.
So what's actually happening here? It's a classic clash of priorities. On one side, you've got the pursuit of money, which means you have to focus on pricing, market demands, and sales logic. Then on the other side, you have self-expression, which is all about passion, artistic integrity, and just the pure joy of making something. A lot of us fall into the trap of thinking we have to grip both of these with the exact same level of intensity. But holding both of them equally tight, that is exactly a recipe for burnout. Prioritizing money starts to feel like a betrayal of your self-expression. The second you slap a price tag on your work, it feels like you're putting a price tag on yourself, and that pure joy of creating, it just evaporates. Okay, let's move to part 1, drawing the boundary to protect your sanity. To keep from burning out, the most vital cognitive shift you can make is establishing what we call a dual identity. You literally have to divide your creative self in two. Think of the seller inside you and the creator inside you as two entirely separate personalities. By drawing a hard line between the person who makes the art and the person who sells it, you stop taking every single market reaction as a personal attack on who you are. When you can look at your priced works just as inventory, strictly from the viewpoint of the seller, it completely smooths out the emotional roller coaster of checking your daily sales stats. Basically, you stop letting a bad sales day ruin your creative spirit. So, how do we actually put this into practice? You have to figure out what to let go of and what to defend. Look, highly earnest creators often burn so much precious time agonizing over commercial elements, like the exact paper quality of their packaging or the specific knot used in the wrapping string. You've got to compromise on that stuff to save time. Using standard shipping tape isn't going to destroy your work's value. But on the flip side, there are elements you must protect fiercely. This is your expressive core. We're talking your specific color palettes, the intentional distortions in a shape, your unique material combinations. These are the things you stubbornly defend, no matter what's trending. If you let outside opinions dilute those, your unique signature just vanishes entirely. Which brings us to part 2, the 70% rule and learning to launch faster. Now that we know what to let go of, we have to talk about speed. 70%. That is the magic number here. When it comes to the commercial side of your work, demanding 100% perfection will absolutely destroy your momentum. Actually, the source material points out a really uncomfortable truth. If you're waiting for absolute perfection before you launch, there is a very high chance you're just using the word preparation as a hiding place. It's a convenient shield to avoid the very real, terrifying fear of publishing something and being judged for it. So instead of agonizing in secret and endlessly tweaking a product in a vacuum, you've got to force yourself into a rapid feedback loop. Set a strict, unbreakable deadline. When that day hits, hit publish, even if the work is only at 70% completion. Why? Because the real world is going to teach you things you could never ever guess on your own. You publish, you observe the market reactions, and then you revise based purely on that data. You'll quickly find that the features you thought people would obsess over get totally ignored, and some tiny detail you barely thought about is exactly what's driving sales. But let's be totally real for a second. There is an emotional cost to this. You have to accept that as you adapt the work based on this incoming market data, your original, pure artistic intent is going to get diluted. The text specifically notes that, to the creator, this iterative process often makes the work feel a bit cheaper. It's kind of a lonely, sad realization. But anticipating that feeling is absolutely crucial. When you realize that this sense of cheapness is really just the translation process, adopting your work so it can actually reach and help a wider audience, it helps you survive the harsh realities of business without having a meltdown. All right, part 3, consumer reality versus niche, where we face some tough market truths. To survive that feeling of your work being diluted, we have to swallow a pretty tough pill. Consumers do not care about the creator's feelings. They really don't. They only care about how the work helps their own lives. Buyers aren't paying for your sweat, your late nights, or your deeply emotional backstory. Even if you explain your profound journey to them, very few are going to open their wallets for the story alone. They are buying utility. They're buying a solution to a problem or a specific moment of joy for themselves. Understanding this gap is incredibly freeing, actually. It means a market rejection isn't a rejection of your soul or your worth. It's literally just a mismatch in utility. Because of this reality, you have to consciously decide where your work lives. If you refuse to chase those fast-moving, high-utility consumer trends, the ones that burn super bright, appeal to the masses, but are forgotten tomorrow, then you are actively choosing the quiet value of niche expression. And niche expression, it means your work probably won't immediately generate massive numbers, but it has this incredible, slow-burning power. It takes immense patience. Your audience will be limited, sure, but for those few people, your work is going to resonate on a profound level, building deep, long-lasting loyalty that fast trends simply cannot buy.
Moving into part 4, the power of PR, a translation tool.
So how exactly do you find those intensely loyal niche fans without feeling like a total sellout? You have to completely reframe how you think about PR and marketing. The source explicitly warns against that old, stubborn mindset that your work should speak for itself. Look, if no one knows it exists, it can't be evaluated, period. PR is not about lowering the quality of your art or acting sleazy. It's simply a necessary translation tool. It is an entirely separate skill set that you learn to bridge the gap between your high-quality expression and the people whose lives will actually be enriched by it. Communicating your value better doesn't degrade your art. It just increases the number of people who get to understand it. Now, to execute this PR safely, you need some solid risk management. Finding that niche audience takes time, so you have to protect yourself financially and emotionally. First up, just assume failure is baked into the process. There will be quiet periods. Second, set strict time and financial budget caps before you start, while your head is still clear so you don't panic and overspend later. Third, always test small. And finally, and this is a big one, separate a marketing failure from your artistic value. If a campaign completely flops, it doesn't mean your art is bad. It just means your translation tool needs a little adjustment. Finally, part 5, choosing your battle. Ultimately, you're standing at a crossroads between two distinct paths. Are you going to prioritize money? Because that requires speed, adapting instantly to trends, and pumping out a higher volume of work. Or will you prioritize legacy and self-expression? That path demands a much slower pace, deep focus, and an absolute obsession with preserving your creative name over making a quick buck. The source makes a really powerful point here. Neither of these paths is morally superior. There's no right answer. You just have to look honestly at your own natural tendencies, figure out which type of pain and pace you are willing to endure, and then lean into it without an ounce of guilt. But hey, don't stress. The choice you make today is not a life sentence. That boundary you draw between art and commerce, it's not set in stone. It is a living, breathing line. As you evolve as a creator, as the market shifts, and as your skills grow, the line you carefully drew today might feel incredibly restrictive a year from now. And that is completely natural. You are allowed to, and honestly expected to, continuously redraw this line to fit whatever version of you exists in the present moment. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We spend so much time stressing over this balance between making money and making art. We treat it like this heavy burden we're doomed to carry. But what if we just flipped that perspective completely? What if, rather than seeing this constant balancing act as a chore, the very act of continuously redrawing that boundary, negotiating with the world, and finding new sides of your creativity, what if that is actually the very thing that keeps your creative spirit alive? Will you let the act of redrawing this boundary become your ultimate form of self-expression? Something to chew on as you get back to your workspace today. Thanks for joining.